aware that I was not audible. Am I better now? Are you guys able to hear me? And this is why we love interactions. There we go. Hi there. There's no Jerry. There's no sound. Zandila, Jerry. Can you guys let me know if there is sound now? And if you guys can hear me, that would be awesome. Okay, fantastic. I just got word that you indeed can hear me. Thank you very much for letting me know, guys. Thank you very much. But from type yes. And as I was saying, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, sorry that you didn't hear the first part of my intro. I was saying thank you and welcome. And if you just let me know where you are viewing me from, and also if this is your first time joining us, this is SAPIN. Who are we? Well, it's simple. We are the SA Property Investors Network, and we are a collection of like-minded individuals who are in the property space who offer support, education, and a network for individuals who want to start and or grow their portfolios. So if you are brand new to the property industry or you want to enter it, but you're very risk adverse, you're not entirely sure, what to do, who to talk to, what you're supposed to do, SAPIN or the SA Properties Investors Network is the place for you. Now, as I was saying, that we have a free webinar that's going to be happening on the 20th of July. So you guys need to go to our website and register for that. And that webinar is going to be talking about the strategy that is best for you. As you know, there's multiple ways that you can structure your property portfolio. So you could have a niche market of, student accommodation, or you can do it mixed and have multi-lets and buy-to-lets or Airbnbs. So, this is a webinar that's going to be discussing what strategy works best. As we know, most times coastal areas work very, very nice for Airbnbs, but potentially there could be, a different strategy that you could use, but you could only find out about that when you register for our free webinar that's happening on the 20th of July. Also, for those who are in Cape Town, we are going to be having an event on the 22nd of July, and that is a property walkthrough. I absolutely love property walkthroughs because they give you an in-depth understanding of the property space, because you get to see a live building as it's being refurbished. You get to understand, the makeup of it. So you get a hands-on understanding of the properties, because sometimes people know theory, but they've never actually walked into a live building and see how it works and what things you need to be refurbished. What do you typically look out for if you're purchasing a property, all of those things that will be happening in Cape Town. So all my Cape Townians, make me proud and register for that event. Like I said, it's happening on the 22nd. And then we have the big one in Johannesburg. That's on the 26th of July. And that is next week. We are going to be having a huge event with ABSA with the hashtag AskABSA. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you will be able to ask the industry elites in ABSA questions that have always been pressing you in terms of the rising interest rates, our economic climate, inflation, all of those questions you have pertaining to property or your portfolio. You will actually have the opportunity to talk to different members of the ABSA banking industry. So we have home loans division, we have economists. You'll be able to ask them for this event. So please put this in your diaries. That will be happening on the 26th of July. As we keep going, we have a lot of events, yes, and they're all over the country. The next one is our 2-day practical property investing workshop. The name says it all. It's practical property investing. Nitty gritty, get to the point. It's standard. That one is going to be happening on the 29th and 30th of July. And then as we cross over to August, I'm super excited about this one. It's going to be happening on the 12th of August, and that is our annual women's event. And for those of you who were there last year, it was huge. It was absolutely huge. We had phenomenal speakers, just amazing women, trailblazing everything in the industry. And we're going to have just the same and even more this year. So ladies, please bring your daughters, your nieces, everybody, just bring them to our event for the women's, and it's only women. So gentlemen, don't try to be slick. It's just for women. And that's going to be happening on the 12th of August. So as I said, we are going to be discussing low-cost housing, rather the rental perspective of low-cost housing, because we understand the current economic climate. People aren't necessarily keen on doing the 20,000 Rand rentals. There is still a market for that. It doesn't mean just because economically we are a bit stringent, doesn't mean this. But for the average person, what kind of investments should you be doing, and the likelihood of it to be renewable. So we're going to be discussing that with the founder of Preferrental, Ross Fitzcharles, just a little bit later, and we're going to be discussing, rental perspective in terms of low cost housing. Is it viable? Is it, a niche market? What are the things you should be looking out for in terms of that? Okay, so Daniel asked, what if Sam identifies as a lady? Unfortunately, he still can't come. It is just for women. It is just for the ladies. It is a huge event. We're proud to be women, so we're going to be having that on the 12th of August. Now, I hope you guys give a warm and huge welcome. I need all the little, is it claps? Yes, I need claps in the chat box for our guest for today, and that is Mr. Ross Fitzcharles. Ross, how are you, sir?
Hey, Kali, I'm good. Thanks, and you? Thanks for
I'm
bringing me onto the
fantastic.
show.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to get straight to it because I do understand that you have a meeting after this because you're a very, very busy man. But people have an understanding of, on average, what rentals they're looking for. But there is this niche market, which is low cost or affordable housing, that particularly isn't quite looked upon. And you as a manager, as a property manager and the founder of Preferrental, I think you have a certain look at it in terms of rentals and which areas do you see the best collections, what areas seem easier to manage. So I want to know, let's just get straight into it. As a property manager, what rentals do you think have the best collections, or you've seen have the best collections? What is the range?
Kali, so just want to start off. So Preferrental, we cover obviously national rentals for landlords through our platform. So what we've seen historically is that prices between 5,000 and 12,000 is typically your lowest risk. So if you look at good standing tenants paying their rental, the national average is around 82% of tenants collecting or paying their rent. And then between that 5,000 and 12,000, it's about 88%. So it's definitely outperforming the national average. So I'd say if you're investing in buy-to-let properties in that space, that is the lowest risk. And it's purely because tenants in that category can absorb some of the interest and the economic impact that we're currently seeing in South Africa. So yeah, that's a good range.
Yeah, that is actually very interesting. You're seeing around the prices of 5,000. Naturally, low cost would be a little bit between 3,000 and about 7,000 rand. But even in that market of 5,000 to 7, the fact that it's about 82%, that's pretty good in this current market.
Yeah, look, that's for the guys between 5 and 12. I think if you're going down to below 5,000, so more the around between 4 and 3,000 rand rentals, then your collections or your good standing tenants are sitting around 69. So you can see that that bracket basically pulls down the national average as well. So 69% brings that 88 down to the 82. So it's a little bit more risky for property investors, but I think the strategy is around that in terms of effectively managing those tenants.
And as you're mentioning strategies, in the price range that you just mentioned, which is between the 5,000 and the 12,000, what strategy would you say best suits that kind of model? Would it be a multi-let or a buy-to-let?
Look, I think there's pros and cons. So buy-to-lets is in that category, in that range. That's sort of a very palatable rental for tenants in South Africa. That's typically your smaller families or your new families, guys starting out working. So that's a good range. And buy-to-let would typically be your safer tenants in that specific range. But within saying that, within that range, multi-lets can also bring you much more return on investment. And it's just because of the multiple tenants you can have on the single sort of property. But yeah, when you go down to the lower risk tenants, then I would say buy-to-let might be a little bit more difficult strategy, and multi-let would potentially give you the highest risk because of the fact you could diversify some of the risk.
That's very interesting, and I find it, when you mention that multi-let has a higher range in terms of the amount of rentals you can collect versus a buy-to-let where typically individuals, it's families and such, so they wouldn't particularly be interested in multi-lets. But then we have to go into account of like, what do you look out for when checking for applications regarding low income rentals versus the standard ones, like you mentioned?
Yeah, look, I think on the standard ones, you're typically looking at tenants that are a bit more stable. If you look at the economy and how how the interest rate has actually affected some of the disposable income for those tenants, they are in a position to absorb some of the interest. Yeah, they're feeling the pressure, but they're a lot more in a position to absorb it than the low risk rentals. So, looking at a 5 to 12,000, you're obviously looking for employment. You're looking for good disposable income. You're looking at previous references. You need to obviously look at any historical willingness and ability to actually pay their rentals. So just to elaborate on that a bit, willingness is where tenant has defaulted before. They've actually been willing to rectify their credit score. Ability is where they actually have the ability to pay the rental. They've got the ability and the track record of showing that they've actually paid their various accounts over the last couple of months or years. So typically, the credit report works on 24 months. I think on the lower risk, on the lower rentals, you typically find that you have a lot more foreigners applying. Foreigners, you need to ensure that the documentations are up to date. You can't do a credit check on those tenants. It's purely just some limitation on the credit bureau side. So if a foreigner has actually converted and got a South African ID, then you can run a credit check on that individual. But I would say on lower risk, lower rentals, you would have to ensure that there's employment. The paperwork is in order. You need to find a way to validate that they're actually getting the income that they say that they're getting. I mean, those are the aspects and the factors that landlords need to work with in terms of lower rentals.
Mm-hmm. That's actually quite interesting in terms of you saying, if it's lower rentals, there's a lot more scrutiny that has to come in, or low cost housing rather. In terms of that, I want to know, as with your expertise, right, which kind of price market would you then say has a tendency to pay on time every time?
Definitely the 5 to 12. That's just shown over history. That's the lowest risk. And then it's easier to collect as well. I think tenants in that bracket sort of tend to pay with EFT or debit orders. If they are in a crunch, they can make a plan to get a short-term loan to support them. Interesting fact is, out of the credit data, you could see that majority of that cluster sits between their debt to income ratio is about 45%. Whereas if you go to the lower rentals, it's much higher. I think the debt to income ratio is sitting about 65% for lower rental tenants compared to the 5 to 12,000. So yeah, the risk is very different in the two categories.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the 5 to 12,000 versus the lower rentals, what I would then want to ask is that typically we do have a shortage in terms of residential properties. So if you are a first time investor and you're like, okay, I have an inclination to want to get into this property industry, maybe do a buy to let standard procedure, I don't want to complicate it too much. Would you then say they should look at the price range of low cost housing, or rather look within the price range of between 5 and 12?
Look, I think there's it depends on the strategy. So if you're just doing buy to lets, then 5 to 12 is your lowest risk. It also depends on what type of tenant you're looking for. So typically when we invest, we look at a property where we'd say maybe we don't want families living in the buy to let properties. We might want to say it's young couples. It really depends on your risk appetite. We've strictly said that, in my personal capacity, I'm talking here, we said that we're looking for a young couple, maybe with one child living in the property. And that's purely because of a risk perspective. We feel that if you've got more children, our children are, they could draw on the walls, and that just increases your maintenance costs. So yeah, it's really about the strategy. I would say if you're going on the lower end, probably looking at multi-let. Multi-let allows you to have various tenants occupying the property. So you can split the rental collection from the various tenants. So you're diversifying your risk of tenant defaults. You're looking at potential increase in revenue. So for a buy-to-let, you could be getting, let's say you buy a property for R1,000,000, you could be getting like anything between 8.5 and 11,000 rand in rental. Your bond is obviously also going to be around about the 10,000 rand a month, and then you need to incorporate the rates and taxes and your levies and all that. On the flip side, for multi-let strategy, you could actually, if you're buying a property, let's say at 25,000 rand, you could split that up into multiple units, and we've seen guys earning 1.5 of that in terms of the rental. So going to a 35,000 rand in rental collections. Again, the benefit is it's higher income, better return on investment, but the most important there is you're diversifying your income over the various properties. So if one tenant defaults, it's not a big impact, whereas with a buy-to-let, if a single tenant defaults, a natural tenant that basically defaults.
Oh, that's very interesting. So then multi-lets would work better in terms of price range, because you're not letting out the whole thing for like 12,000 rand. You can then do multiple 5,000 rands, which in turn stretches out, and that would also be in terms of affordable housing.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, your legwork is a bit more. You've got 5 tenants to work with. You've got 5 tenants basically telling you that there's things wrong with the property. The benefit is you could have one. You could fix most of those properties at a single destination, well, the one ARF. So you could reduce maintenance costs in terms of that. But yeah, it really depends.
So I just want to keep you on this for a little longer, because we have a gentleman by the name of Bevan. He is our one who always gives us the golden nuggets of property and facilities management, and both of you guys are on management. So as we're talking about low cost housing or affordable housing, or rather, rentals within a price range that is affordable for the market, I just want to quickly introduce Bevan on to the platform. Hi, Bevan. How are you?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be with Ross. I've done some nice work in the past with Ross, so there's always great learnings to come from him as well.
That is fantastic. I appreciate the effortless plug. Okay, so as Ross was mentioning, Bevan, that depending on your strategy, be it for affordable housing or a low cost housing, you come in from a facilities perspective in terms of SAP and prepaid. What would you then say if an investor wants to invest in affordable housing or low cost housing? What would they need to be looking out for?
So there's 2 things that I'm going to point at today. So the one is water. Around water, what I found is in the low cost housing space, the affordable housing space, what we have is we've got a tenant who's transitioning in from a rural environment to an urban environment. And often in the rural space, they're not paying for utilities, and specifically for water. So they're getting subsidized for water. And I found from experience in the space is when you suddenly send them an invoice at the end of the month to say, hey, you need to pay your share of the water, there's a lot of the surprise and pushback. They go like, oh, I have to pay for the water. I thought it was included in the rent. So first thing is do your due diligence up front and inform. Communication is the big one with this demographic as such. So inform them, this is what your lease includes, etc. And then the other side to it is you want to move away from that administrative side. And this idea for like a multi-let, as an example, where you're making everyone share their water consumption, rather put in prepaid water meters, and as a bare minimum, a prepaid water meter for the whole property, but ideally you want for each unit. And I think Ross will also agree to the fact that if you're trying to then tell tenants that they must pay their little portion of the whole, the first thing that happens is they go like, oh, but I'm not here on the weekends. Why must I pay the same amount as that one? And you create like an administration nightmare for yourself. So on the water side, definitely put prepaid meters in and make sure they what I find is people respect what they pay for up front. They don't respect what they're not paying for. So if you get it for free, you don't worry about it. Then you get a surprise when you do have to pay. So that's one of the big important things around water, especially a multi-let. Ross has spoken about that extra 1.5% rental you can potentially make as a return on the property. But with it, you've got a lot higher utility usage. So you want to hand over that responsibility as seamlessly to your tenants. And then the other one I want to point to on like sort of a nice golden nugget, and it's something that's very important that you include in your lease agreement, is that you can actually recover your rent for defaulting tenants through their prepaid electricity meter. So if they're not paying their rent, like maybe they've done a shortfall of like 200 Rand of their rent, you can actually load that onto the prepaid meter. And we all know tenants will pay for the things they need first, and as a landlord, they'll leave you to last. So they need electricity, then they pay for that. So that's a nice tip, but I really do sort of push people to the fact that a product like preferrental, where you get the guarantees up front and all of that, makes a huge difference to your sort of peace of mind. I'm sure Ross will talk about that a bit more, but I'm like a big fan of preferrental and what they do. So those were my two major points: manage the water with a prepaid water meter and communication, and then also that ability to recover some arrears through your prepaid electricity meter. And talk to us if you want to know a little bit more about that.
And so, with that understanding, Ross, this one is actually quite interesting, especially because, you are the founder of Preferental. Not sure if you've ever come across this, but it would be interesting to hear insight. Sam wants to know, hi guys, what's the rate of property hijacking in the 5 to 12K rental market, and how can one mitigate this risk?
Look, I'm going to be honest here. I'm not a specialist, so I won't be able to answer that question. I have not, in the 5-6 years we've been operating Preferental, I've never come across a case where a property has been hijacked. You obviously have tenants that moving to the property and then potentially vacates, or not vacates, that squats in the property in the sense of they're not paying rental. But with Preferental, we guarantee the eviction cover for landlords. So our lawyers, Expello, basically looks after that eviction for the landlord, and they make sure that the tenant is effectively evicted without an additional cost or burden to the landlord. In terms of property hijacking, I think that's a lot more common in the inner city areas where you've got a building of units within there, and people would move in and then basically start taking over some of the management. So if you're not hands-on in terms of managing your property, this is the risk you expose yourself to. If you're not checking in with your tenants on a regular basis, then this is definitely a risk that you need to be aware of. So, Bev, I think you might have some insights on this to share from a building's perspective. I know you've got some history in that. Where multiple units within a single building is, and I don't know if you've got any experience on that.
Yeah, so from a ratio perspective or market numbers perspective, I can't give you the exacts on that. I know that they go through seasons in certain areas where there'll be almost like a group who then targets specific buildings. But I think what it comes down to from our perspective as landlords is you want to reduce your fear factor. You want to reduce your risk. So there's two ways to do that. Is obviously you need a quality property. So if you're going to be a slumlord, you're going to end up having people hijack your building. So, but if you've got a good building, then those hijackers don't have too much right to stand on. Well, they don't have the ability to rile up the existing tenant base and convert them into hijacking tenants. So you have happy tenants, you've got more power over your property. So that's one way for me, is don't be a slumlord. Make sure you provide a quality product so your facilities are in place and everything's running smoothly. And then the other side, to give you peace of mind, is look into things like Preferental, look into things like Expello, where it takes away that fear. You're paying a small fee towards it, but then what happens is if something goes wrong, you've already got the experts who are then getting involved with you. So it doesn't sort of snowball, especially on the Preferental side. If one tenant defaults, you want to catch it quickly. You don't want to get to the point where it's 10 or 20 tenants in your multi-let who are now defaulting, and then you've got to deal with like a mob instead of the individuals.
Okay, that is sound advice, and that's why we appreciate Bevan with your golden nuggets. Before I let both of you gentlemen go, I have just one more question in terms of evictions, because Ross, you did mention how preferential actually take care of all the eviction costs as part of your package, and some girl wants to know. Hi everyone. When it comes to evicting tenants in the lower bracket, how do you go about it? Would you go about evicting a tenant differently for somebody who makes, let's say, about 3,000 Rand per month for rental versus somebody who's paying in the price bracket of about 18,000 Rand? Is there a difference, or is the eviction process the same throughout?
From my experience, it's the same. Eviction is a regulated action within South Africa. So you have the PI Act, protection of illegal evictions. So whether your rent is 1,000 or whether it's 18,000, you can't be treating tenants. You can't just throw tenants out of the property. You can't just lock their doors. You can't remove their doors. So all of those little things you can't remove. You can't switch off their water, electricity supply. So that's called spoliation. And what could end up happening is that the tenant could literally go to the tribunal and put spoliation on as something that they've experienced with this landlord. If they give an example, the court would actually be in the favor of the tenant. And that's why a Bevan solution is also so important. So with preferential, we guarantee the rental. So whether your tenant pays or not, we cover the rent. We take care of the legal eviction for you. But from a utility perspective, like I said, you can't switch off the water electricity supply. But when you control the water or the electricity via a prepaid solution, then basically tenants would have to pay their utility. They have to buy units. So you don't put that pressure on you as a landlord in terms of having to do certain things. So if tenants can't afford the rent, they can't afford utilities or electricity, they're not going to have electricity.
Fantastic. And as Bevan said, if you mitigate these things, then we do understand that tenants will pay for their needs first. So you don't switch off electricities or anything like that. You just mitigate it by putting it on there because they are going to pay for electricity.
Yeah, and I just want to add on that. So basic process for landlords, whether you've got a 3,000 or 18,000 tenant, is you need to go through the emotions of what you need to do for evictions. So if your tenant doesn't pay, make sure that you get a letter of demand out to the tenant within the first 5 business days at least. The law stipulates that a tenant has 20 business days to rectify that. So, and it's important to say 20 business days because typically that folds on over to the next month. Once the lease has now been or the letter of demand time has basically elapsed, then effectively you can go to court and submit that the lease agreement is cancelled. It seems like a daunting process, and that's why we partner with experts just to help landlords in that process as well.
Fantastic. And as I see quite a few people want to connect with Bevan and Ross, well, the email address will be in our chat box. So you just contact support at SA Property Investors Network, and we will be able to connect you with Ross or Bevan in terms of assisting you with potentially your properties or any questions you might have in terms of facilities management. We can put those in the chat box, and you can just follow the link and contact us, and we'll put you in connection with them. So, gentlemen, before I let you go, I want to say thank you very much for joining. And do you have any parting words for our viewers?
Thanks, Kali. It was lovely joining you on this coffee chat. I'd say if you are managing your property yourself, make sure that you're using the right tools. Make sure that you have the right systems and processes in place. I think from a preferential point of view, that's why we built the platform, is to assist landlords in effectively manage their portfolio. We take away the risk with our preferential promise, where we guarantee the rent, the eviction, and property damages for them. If you're keen to check out preferential, please email support at sapropertynetwork.com, and they will connect you with us. Thanks.
Fantastic. And Bevan?
Awesome. I think the key word for me with this type of tenant, especially in the affordable housing, is communication. So we've got to educate them as to how we want things to work. So communication, everything in the lease agreement, everything in writing. Make sure that they know what you expect from them, and then they will comply.
Fantastic. And to just quickly answer Sam's question, who wants to know, does preferential only place the tenants or do they manage the tenants throughout the lease period? They do both. So they will place a tenant for you, and also they will do management. However, I want to say thank you again, gentlemen. And as always, you are more than welcome to show up again and help educate the viewers for the coffee chat. As I bid you guys farewell, I just want to remind you of the events that are going to be happening, the ones that I'm super excited for. The first one, as we said, is the free webinar that talks about what strategy is best for you. Whether you're starting out or you want to expand your property portfolio, you should absolutely register for this webinar. It's free, guys. It is very informative, and it's very educational, and it literally teaches you what strategy is best for you. After that, we have an event in Cape Town. These are one of my favorites, is a property walkthrough. You get a hands-on, in-depth experience in terms of property and things to look out for, or how refurbishing happens. That's going to be happening on the 22nd of July. Then the big one, which is hashtag Ask ABSA, that one is going to be happening on the 26th of July. Please go to our website or visit us on sapropertynetwork.com. Those details will be in our website. And the one for ABSA is literally a panelist. So you get to ask ABSA questions that have been pressing your mind, and you're trying to understand, our rising interest rates, the economy. You'll be able to ask the ABSA elite for this event. And lastly, second lastly, actually, it is the practical property investing. As it is, it's right to the nitty-gritty. It's a 2-day workshop that's going to be happening on the 29th of July. If you are not part of this, you are absolutely missing out, because it's 2 days of informative information. We're very hands-on. We give you all the nips, ticks, and everything you need to know about practical property investing. And lastly, is the one that I am super excited for, that Sam is not allowed to come in, and that is the women's event that is happening on the 12th of August. If you were with us the last year, you know how absolutely fantastic it was, with women empowering each other, and this event is going to be no different. So please make note for all of those dates in the calendar. That's on the 12th of August. I want to say, as always, thank you very much for joining, and from me to you, I will see you next week.